Hello, welcome to another episode of History in the Dark. I am your host, Darkness the Curse. And before we begin, as always, thank you so much to my generous patrons, my British rail critics, and of course my underwater train finders. You are the reason why this content remains magical. Dun 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 dun. And today we are going to be discussing Harry Potter. Not really, not exactly Harry Potter anyway. But given the recent surge in interest in Harry Potter with the release of Hogwarts Legacy, great game by the way, I decided I should probably talk about our resident Harry Potter celebrity in the locomotive history scene, which is of course Olton Hall. Now, many of you Potterheads that are watching this may not understand what I'm talking about, but the rail fans sure do. This is the story of the Great Western Railway's 4900 class 5972 Olton Hall. Now, I don't think the Great Western Railway in general needs any introduction when it comes to the United Kingdom and railway history. They're actually one of the big four that was established during the grouping in 1921, but they're the only one that existed before that. The Great Western Railway was actually founded in 1833, one of the earliest railways in general, in fact. And it was so big and popular when the grouping happened that they just let the Great Western Railway continue existing. They just basically took over the few independent railways that still existed within their new territory. The Great Western Railway enjoyed a tremendous amount of success, as well as the creation of many different classes of locomotives. One of them happened to be the 4900s. Now, I keep calling them 4900s, but they're generally called the Hall class. They're 460 mixed traffic steam locomotives that were designed by Charles Collet. 259 of them were actually built at Swindon Works, being numbered from 4900 to 6958. And they're actually one of the more influential designs when it comes to the UK. Certain features that exist on them were carried over to the Black 5s, as well as the Thompson Class B1s. As 10-wheelers, they already had a significant advantage being, 10-wheelers. 10-wheelers are generally pretty good and very flexible, which is why the wheel arrangement was chosen, because at the time the Great Western Railway was looking for a locomotive that could pretty much do everything. They needed to be able to pull freight and passenger service effectively, without any issues between them. The GWR had already had some pretty good success when it came to 10-wheelers in general, when it came to the Saints, Stars, and Castle classes, but they were struggling in the freight department. The mixed traffic locomotives they had were the 4300s, which were pretty successful in their own right, but they were starting to have some issues with the increasing weight of the trains. The 4700s were then introduced to remedy this. They were 280s and pretty good, but Charles Collet thought that perhaps a modified Saint class with smaller wheels to undertake those duties might be a better option, given that a 10-wheeler would have an additional leading wheel. And he would commit to this Saint modification idea by the fact that the first Hall wasn't actually a Hall, technically. He modified 2925 St. Martin, one of the Saints, in 1924, with 6-foot driving wheels and realigned cylinders that were placed in relation to the driving axle, as well as refitting her with a more modern castle-type cab. In that new form, St. Martin's trials lasted 3 years, and during that time, Collet added additional modifications to improve the idea further, such as changing the pitch of the taper boiler and adding outside steam pipes. The result was actually quite excellent, and the first batch of Halls was ordered in 1928. They get their name from the fact that all their names have the word Hall in them, with the exception of St. Martin, because they were named after English and Welsh country houses. The production models weren't that different from the Saint prototype, besides a slight change in wheel diameter, as well as an extra valve setting. Their overall weight had also increased by 2 long tons, but they wound up with a tractive effort that was almost 2,500 pounds more than their prototype. The first 14 of them actually received a trial by fire exercise, basically, because they were sent to the Cornish main line, which was insanely busy. However, they handled it perfectly. They were incredibly successful there and all over the system. They were so good, in fact, that by the time the first production batch had been finished, a further 20 were placed on order as well. Throughout the 30s, further orders were added. The halls were proving to be an exceptional piece of work, doing exactly what they needed to do and then some. It wouldn't be till 1937 that the subject of our story, Olton, would be constructed, her first run being the 30th of April of that year. At the time, there wasn't really a whole lot to differentiate her from her sisters. She was just another hall class. That was good, they were good locomotives, but she herself wouldn't become distinctive until far, far later. Her early career was actually astonishingly uneventful. There weren't that many incidents when it comes to the halls in general. The only one of note during this time would be in 1941, when 4911, Bowden Hall, was actually hit by a bomb in World War II. The crew survived by sheltering under the steps of the nearby signal box, but 4911 was lost entirely. She was actually only one of 2 Great Western Railway locomotives damaged beyond repair during World War II. Beyond that, though, they served faithfully throughout the war and beyond. Naturally, they were good enough to still be around by the time British Rail took over, the new nationalized vision for British rail lines. British Rail, despite wanting to modernize, did keep steam traction until the 60s, and as a result, the halls still stuck around. Though official withdrawals did begin in 1959, and the last of them will be taken out of service in 1965. Olton was removed from the rails in 1963, and like the vast majority of her sisters, was sent to a scrapyard to be broken up. But like so many preserved steam locomotives in the UK, she wound up in the one scrapyard where it was alright. It's okay for you to be there. The Woodham Brothers scrapyard. Oh, they come up so much. The Woodham Brothers was a scrapyard based around the Bury Docks in Bury, South Wales. They received 297 withdrawn British Railway steam locomotives, but 213 of those would be rescued. How? Why? Did they just love the locomotives that much? Well, not exactly. It was just a coincidental business decision with them. So they got a bunch of old rolling stock from the railway too, and they found that it was much more cost-effective to break down the cars rather than the locomotives. It took less time and they made more money. So, as a result, the locomotives themselves just kind of sat around, and when British Rail started withdrawing the steam traction, people were livid over in the UK. The preservation movement was in full swing during the late 60s and 70s, and it didn't take long for people to realize that the Woodham Brothers still had the steam locomotives just hanging out. They were just chilling. They were weathered and rusty, but they were there and could still be restored. They could be saved. And the Woodham Brothers, to their credit, was totally willing to sell the locomotives to preservationists with the very reasonable terms that they pay the scrap value of the locomotive, as well as the fee that the Woodham Brothers had to pay to British Rail, who under the contract actually charged them if they didn't scrap a locomotive. Which is weird and annoying, and I don't know why you were doing that. Stop it. Just stop. Anyway, Olton actually survived in the scrapyard until 1981. Nearly 2 decades of just sitting, and she was sold to a man named David Smith, who took her to the Horbury Railway Works in Wakefield. She sat around for a little longer after that, as restoring an old steam locomotive with all the infrastructure and the personnel no longer existing is expensive. It's really hard to do that, but funds were worked up by 1994, and she was moved to Carnforth NPD for restoration. She was brought up to steam again for the first time since her withdrawal in 1998. She's actually one of 10 halls that managed to survive into preservation. But she's easily the most famous because unlike the others who either went on to simple static display or possibly running again on the main line, both respectable preservation careers all around, Olton went on to be a movie star. Ah yes, this is where Harry Potter comes into it. Because, as some of you may know if you're a fan of Harry Potter, or at least a little bit familiar, the way the students get to Hogwarts Castle to learn about magic is actually by train. Harry Potter is a British franchise, so it makes sense that trains would be a part of the vision. Naturally, when the first movie was made, they were looking for a locomotive to put in it. But Olton wasn't actually the first locomotive to be re-liveried to appear hauling that express. To promote the 4th book, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Southern Railway West Country class locomotive 34027, Taw Valley, was herself repainted to be the express locomotive. But she was actually rejected by the first film's director, Chris Columbus, because he felt that she just looked too modern a steam locomotive. See, the students in Harry Potter are going to a castle to study magic. Despite taking place in the fairly modern day, there's still a lot of medieval elements to it. And yeah, a steam locomotive isn't exactly medieval, but he wanted the locomotive to look at least a little bit old. And eventually he settled on 5972. She was in good working order and could actually move. And can we talk about the fact that they went out of their way to get an actual working, preserved steam locomotive for the movie? Do you have any idea how easy it would have been for them to just CGI a steam locomotive in? That's all they had to do. They did not have to go the extra mile and use an actual working locomotive. But they did. And frankly, that deserves some props. In the film, Olton retains her number, but she was given new nameplates, carrying the name Hogwarts Castle instead, which is hilarious because it results in a lot of jokes among rail fans because she's now named Castle. The Castles were a completely different class of 10-wheelers, also introduced by Great Western Railways. So occasionally you might see someone quip that the Hall thinks it's a castle. But hey, this is a celebrity. Excuse me. How do the wizards and witches get to practice magic without this locomotive? You tell me. They don't. When we're talking about Harry Potter, we are talking about a billion-dollar franchise here, okay? Harry Potter has gone far beyond those original books. I think we can all agree on that. As a result, there are many fans and people who just want to see, well, the Hogwarts Castle, the locomotive that pulls the train. Even though we all know it's Olton Hall, and this locomotive has her own history in and of herself, well, people want to see her act, I guess. And hey, you know what? Fine. As long as it boosts ticket sales and gets people paying attention to railway preservation, I am totally cool with this. And ever since the first Harry Potter movie, Olton's done mostly Harry Potter-related tours, masquerading as Hogwarts Castle. She generally no longer wears the green livery that she would have been under Great Western Railway. That's what they were known for, being green. But for the Hogwarts Castle, she's red. Which, to be fair, she looks great in red, so hey, it's fine. On occasion, she does still pull a normal, regular excursion service. But such activities have been pretty rare, as the whole Harry Potter thing kinda keeps her busy. If she's not pulling some kind of Hogwarts fan event, then she's on static display for some kind of Hogwarts fan event. It happens a lot. That's really all she does anymore. In fact, the latter is what she's been doing lately. In 2015, she was put on static display at Warner Brothers Studio Tour London, the making of Harry Potter, near Watford. She'll be there until the lease that Warner Brothers has on her from West Coast Railways expires. That being said, based on pictures, it seems she's being well taken care of and being kept indoors, so I think she'll be alright. And she's being leased, which means that West Coast Railways is constantly generating money from Warner Brothers doing this. So, you can't really complain about that. Plus, there are many different replicas of Olton as the Hogwarts Castle existing all over the world. I mean, there's toys, for one, and there's even full-scale models in some places. At least 3 that I know of. And on top of that, she actually managed to get one of her sisters some work. Number 4920 was actually also saved from the Woodham Brothers scrapyard. And she also is now playing the Hogwarts Castle, though as a static exhibit over in Japan at Warner Brothers Studio Tours Tokyo. She was exported from Southampton in December of 2021, and that's where she sits today. Oh, in case you're wondering, 4920's name is Dumbleton Hall. Really? Dumbleton Hall? Her name is Dumbleton? Okay, was that really a coincidence? Really? Dumbledore? I mean, I guess it could be a coincidence, but I mean, either way, that's kind of funny. In any event, obviously, as a result of Olton's success when it comes to playing a fictional steam locomotive on the big screen, it's given the Hall some well-deserved recognition the world over. People who see the locomotive often look into it. And because this is the internet, well, even if they're searching from the Harry Potter end of things, trivia is trivia. Fun fact, the Hogwarts Castle is actually played by a real-life locomotive, Olton Hall, a member of the Hall class from the Great Western Railways. And then it gets people curious, and then they look into what those are. And what I'm saying is, it's an avenue to get people involved in the historical preservation of these kinds of locomotives, or at least get them interested and curious. Olton's success is good for the community, is what I'm trying to say. And she's still ingrained in that role. I mean, she just appeared in the recent Hogwarts Legacy game. Very early, in fact. Pulling the train, taking all the wizards and witches to Hogwarts to learn about magic and- Wait, I'm sorry. there's a hall class in this game. This game takes place in 1899. I just explained this. You know, this is the kind of historical inaccuracy that really gets under my skin. Did the developers do any research at all? What are you trying to imply? That it was, in fact, wizards and witches and magic that created the hall class in the first place, and they existed well before the 1920s when they let the Muggles have it? Don't be ridiculous! I'm gonna go to the devs' home offices and have a word with them about this. And I'm a Gryffindor, so you know I'm not joking. And with that, a special thank you to all my underwater train finders. Thomas Ward, Somedude267, Orange Glass, Royal Hudson 2860, Lord Hoth 444, Benjamin Owens, Panzer Kitsu 131-232, Mr. Black Rose, Josh Johnson, Metal for Life Guy, Anzac A1, Arthur Roy, DM Tribal Typhoon, Tommy Rossini, Lord Captain Von Thrust III, Joshua Long, Alaric Jaspers, Brian, Jack Carson's Railroad Videos, Major Klutz, Hayden DeGrow, Ohio Trucker 1, Master of None, and Dr. Racer 78. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.